You checked your account balance 3 days ago. The number looked fine. Not great, but fine. Today you check it again. And somehow, without any major purchase, without any crisis, without any single moment you could point to and say, that was the problem, several $100s have disappeared. You scroll through the transactions trying to find the culprit. But there is no culprit. There is only a list. $47 here, $18 there, $12 for something you have already forgotten. A subscription you meant to cancel. A lunch that did not feel like a decision at the time. A convenience purchase that seemed so small it barely registered. Each transaction is harmless on its own. Together, they have drained your account before the month is halfway through. And the most unsettling part is not the amount. It is the fact that you cannot explain where it went. This pattern, the invisible drain, destroys more financial progress than any single bad decision ever could. Not because any one of these purchases is a mistake, but because they are happening automatically, below the threshold of conscious decision-making, every single day. This video is about understanding why that happens, and about the 15 small habits that close the drain, permanently. Before we dive in, let's discuss about the 1,000 tiny cuts, what is actually bleeding your financial life. We live in a culture that talks about money in terms of the big decisions. Buy a house or rent. Invest in stocks or real estate. Start a business or stay employed. These are the conversations that fill financial media, self-help books, and dinner table discussions about wealth. And those decisions matter. Nobody is arguing they do not. But for most people, the gap between where they are financially and where they want to be is not primarily explained by the big decisions. It is explained by the small ones. The ones made so quickly and so habitually that they barely register as decisions at all. The ones made while scrolling through a phone, while standing in a checkout line, while clicking through a promotional email during lunch, while adding one more thing to a shopping cart that already contains what you came for. The financial reality most people live inside is not built by occasional dramatic choices. It is built, day by day, by the accumulated weight of small automatic behaviors. And this is the central insight that this documentary is built around. Your financial life is not the sum of your intentions. It is the sum of your systems. So, what is the difference between a decision and a habit? There is a meaningful distinction in behavioral science between a decision and a habit. A decision is a conscious, deliberate evaluation of options. A habit is an automatic response triggered by a cue in your environment. Research from Duke University suggests that roughly 45% of the behaviors people perform each day are not decisions at all. They are habits, automatic sequences executed with minimal conscious involvement. Most overspending is not the product of bad decisions. It is the product of spending habits that operate below the level of conscious evaluation. The person who buys a coffee every morning on the way to work is not deciding to buy a coffee every morning. They are executing a habit. The cue is passing the coffee shop. The routine is buying coffee. The reward is the familiar comfort of holding a warm cup. Nobody decides to waste money. They simply have habits that, in aggregate, spend it in ways they did not consciously choose. Understanding this distinction matters enormously. Because if overspending were a decision problem, the solution would be better decisions. But if it is a habit problem, the solution is different. It is better systems, better environmental design, better friction architecture. You cannot willpower your way out of a habit system. You can only replace it with a better one. Let's learn from a story that might sound familiar. A woman named Rachel earned a comfortable income. By any external measure, she was financially responsible. She paid her bills on time. She had no significant debt. She contributed to her retirement account. But at 34, Rachel had essentially zero net worth beyond her retirement balance. Nothing invested outside work. No emergency fund beyond a few $100s. No savings to speak of. She could not explain where the money went. She did not feel like she spent extravagantly. She did not take expensive holidays or buy luxury items. When she finally sat down and tracked every transaction for a single month, the picture became clear. $420 on food and drinks she had not planned. $260 on subscriptions, of which she actively used perhaps $60 worth. $180 on small convenience purchases, things ordered online because it was easier than going to a shop. $80 on promotional deals she bought because they were on sale, not because she needed them. $940. Gone. Not on any single thing she could call a mistake. Gone through 1,000 tiny cuts she never saw coming. Rachel's story is not unusual. It is the median. And it is the story this video exists to help you change. So, let's talk about why willpower is the wrong tool for this problem. The most common response to the discovery of habitual overspending is a commitment to try harder, to be more disciplined, to pay more attention, to make better choices, to hold yourself to a higher standard. This response is so universal that it is almost reflexive. Something is wrong with my behavior, so I need to apply more effort to correct it. And it almost never works. Not because the effort is not genuine, but because willpower is fundamentally the wrong tool for this particular problem. The willpower research. The science of willpower has been studied extensively over the past 3 decades, and the conclusions are consistent and somewhat uncomfortable. Willpower is a finite resource. Research by psychologist Roy Baumeister established the concept of ego depletion, the finding that acts of self-control draw from a limited mental reservoir. The more decisions you make, the more willpower you exercise, the more depleted that reservoir becomes throughout the day. By the time most people are making their spending decisions, after a long workday, after managing dozens of other demands on their attention and discipline, the willpower reservoir is substantially depleted. This is not a character weakness. It is a cognitive reality. And it explains why most people's overspending happens not in the morning but in the evenings. Not at the beginning of the week but toward the end. Not on their most energized days but on their most exhausted ones. Tired, depleted, slightly stressed. These are the conditions under which the spending habits activate most powerfully. And these are precisely the conditions under which willpower is at its weakest. Fighting habitual overspending with willpower is like trying to stop a river with your hands. The effort is real. The outcome is predictable. The retailer's advantage. There is a second reason willpower fails that is less discussed but perhaps more important. You are not fighting your own psychology alone. You are fighting an entire industry that has spent decades and billions of dollars studying exactly how to bypass it. Modern retail, both physical and digital, is an engineered environment. Every element of the experience has been researched, tested, and optimized for a single purpose: to minimize the gap between desire and purchase. The layout of a supermarket is not accidental. The placement of promotional items at the end of aisles, the positioning of high-margin products at eye level, the sensory experience of a bakery department near the entrance. These are the products of decades of consumer research and optimization. Online retail has refined this even further. One-click purchasing eliminates the moment of reconsideration that entering payment details creates. Saved credit card information removes the friction of retrieving a card. Recommended products appear at precisely the moment of highest purchase intent. Limited time offers create artificial urgency that bypasses rational evaluation. Every single one of these design elements is specifically engineered to defeat the deliberative, evaluative mental process that would otherwise prevent an impulsive purchase. When an individual tries to resist these systems using nothing but mental effort, they are bringing willpower to an engineering problem. The outcome is not personal failure. It is a predictable result of a fundamental mismatch between the tool and the challenge. So, what actually works? The research on behavior change is equally consistent on the other side of this question. What actually changes habitual spending behavior is not increased effort. It is changed environment. When the cues that trigger spending habits are removed or altered, the habits weaken and eventually extinguish. When friction is added between impulse and purchase, the purchase frequency drops dramatically even without any conscious effort to resist. When saving is made automatic and effortless, saving rates increase substantially without any increase in subjective discipline. The solution to an engineering problem is better engineering. And that is precisely what the 15 habits in this video represent. Not more willpower, better design. What are the structural conditions that make overspending the default? Understanding why overspending happens to smart, responsible, well-intentioned people requires looking at the structural conditions most people live inside. Because the conditions themselves produce overspending as a natural and almost inevitable outcome. It is not a moral failing. It is a predictable response to a specific environment. The invisible financial position. Most people have only a vague, intermittent sense of their actual financial position at any given moment. They check their account when they are about to make a significant purchase and are not sure if they can afford it. They check when their balance sends them an alert. They check when something feels off. The rest of the time, their spending decisions are made without any direct reference to their actual financial reality. This is not laziness. It is the absence of what behavioral researchers call ambient financial awareness, a continuous, low-effort sense of where you stand financially that informs every spending decision in real time. When ambient financial awareness is absent, spending decisions are made in a vacuum. Each individual purchase seems acceptable because it is evaluated in isolation rather than as part of an accumulating total. The $47 transaction does not feel significant because you are not simultaneously aware that it is the 14th transaction of $47 or more this month. Context makes meaning. Without context, every small purchase is invisible. The single pool money illusion. A second structural condition that produces overspending is what financial psychologists call the single pool illusion. Most people treat their money as a single and differentiated resource. The checking account holds the money. The money is available for whatever needs arise. Bills come out, spending comes out, what remains is whatever remains. In this framework, there is no structural distinction between the money set aside for rent and the money available for a spontaneous dinner out. Both live in the same account. Both look identical, and both feel equally available. This absence of mental accounting, or more importantly, structural accounting, means that spending in one category is invisible in its effect on other categories until the total runs low enough to trigger concern. By that point, the spending has already happened. The digital payment disconnect. There is a well-documented neurological phenomenon that financial researchers have studied extensively. Physical cash, when handed over in a transaction, activates regions of the brain associated with pain and loss. The experience of handing over physical money is psychologically felt as a real loss. Digital payments, cards, contactless, online checkout, mobile payments, do not activate the same response. The transaction feels abstract. There is no physical object leaving your possession. The number on the screen changes, but the experience lacks the visceral quality of loss that cash produces. Studies have consistently shown that people spend significantly more when using cards than when using cash for the same categories of purchase. Not because they intend to. Because the psychological brake that cash activates is simply absent. In a world where almost all transactions are now digital, this brake is almost permanently disengaged for most people. The manufactured desire machine. A final structural condition is the sheer volume and sophistication of desire manufacturing to which the average person is exposed every day. The average person in a developed economy is exposed to several thousand marketing messages per day across digital and physical environments. Each of these messages is specifically designed to create or amplify a desire that may not have existed before the message arrived. A promotional email does not inform you of a product you were already planning to purchase. It creates the idea that you want something. then immediately provides the mechanism to purchase it, in a sequence designed to prevent deliberation. The desire that leads to a purchase does not always originate inside the person. Very often it is implanted from outside, and then experienced as though it were internal. Understanding this does not eliminate the desire, but naming its external origin creates a small but significant moment of critical distance that the habits in this video are designed to exploit. How the commerce system is engineered against your financial goals. The previous section described the structural conditions most people live inside. This section goes one level deeper, into the specific mechanisms of the commercial environment that exploit those conditions. Because understanding these mechanisms is not just intellectually interesting. It is practically necessary. You cannot build effective defenses against a system you do not understand. The Friction Removal Project. If you wanted to understand what modern retail has been optimizing for over the past 2 decades, you could describe it in 2 words: friction removal. Friction is anything that creates a pause between desire and purchase. A pause in which deliberation can occur. In which the rational mind can evaluate whether the purchase is consistent with stated goals and actual financial resources. Friction is the enemy of impulse purchasing. And impulse purchasing is the engine of enormous portions of retail revenue. The entire history of digital retail can be read as a progressive campaign to remove every possible moment of friction from the path between wanting and buying. Amazon's one-click purchasing patent, granted in 1999, was a landmark moment in this project. The insight was that even the 20 seconds required to enter payment and shipping information was enough time for reconsideration to occur. Remove those 20 seconds and conversion rates increase dramatically. Saved payment methods, pre-filled addresses, auto-renewal subscriptions, express checkout, buy now pay later with zero-click approval. Each innovation removes another friction point. Each friction point removed produces another measurable increase in purchase frequency. The result is an environment in which buying is easier, faster, and psychologically lighter than it has ever been in human history. And saving, which still requires effort, still requires navigation, still requires active intention, remains as friction-laden as it has always been. The asymmetry is not accidental. It is the product of enormous investment. The subscription trap. The subscription economy deserves its own examination, because it represents one of the most effective spending drain mechanisms ever invented. Subscriptions exploit a specific cognitive bias, the set and forget phenomenon. Once a subscription is established, the recurring charge becomes background noise. It happens automatically, below the threshold of monthly decision-making. It never asks to be renewed. It simply continues. Research on subscription spending consistently shows that people significantly underestimate how many subscriptions they hold and how much they spend on them monthly. When asked to estimate their monthly subscription spend, most people are off by 40 to 60%, dramatically underestimating the actual total. The business model of subscriptions is built on this underestimation. The value proposition at sign-up is carefully calculated to appear worth the monthly cost. But the ongoing cost, once the initial novelty fades, is rarely re-evaluated against actual usage. Most people are paying monthly for services they use once a quarter or less. Many are paying for services they have not used in 6 months or more and have simply forgotten they are paying for. The promotional pricing illusion. Sale pricing and promotional offers represent another sophisticated mechanism for extracting unplanned spending. The psychological principle at work is loss aversion, the well-documented finding that the pain of losing something is approximately twice as powerful as the pleasure of gaining something of equivalent value. A sale price does not just make a product cheaper. It creates the perception of a time-limited opportunity. Failing to buy becomes a loss, specifically, the loss of the discount, which will expire. And because the brain responds to potential losses with disproportionate urgency, the sale creates genuine psychological pressure to act. This pressure bypasses the rational evaluation of whether the purchase was intended, needed, or financially sound. The only question the sale frame asks is, can I afford this right now at this price? Not, was I planning to buy this? Not, does this serve my financial goals? Not, will I actually use this? Just, can I afford it at this price, before the price goes back up? The answer to that question is almost always yes. And so the purchase happens. And the money leaves. And the month ends shorter than it should have. The architecture of controlled spending. People who maintain consistent financial progress, who build savings reliably, who do not experience the invisible drain despite being exposed to the same commercial environment, share a set of structural habits that distinguish them from the pattern of habitual overspending. These habits are not about having more willpower or higher income. They are about having designed their financial environment differently. They partition their money structurally. One of the most consistent habits of financially stable people is the use of multiple accounts for different financial purposes. Rather than maintaining a single pool from which all expenses are drawn, they maintain structural separation between categories of money. A bills account receives the exact amount needed to cover all fixed monthly expenses. It is not used for discretionary spending. Its balance is not mentally available for anything other than its designated purpose. A spending account receives a predetermined discretionary allowance, the amount budgeted for food, entertainment, personal spending, and all variable expenses. When this account is empty, the spending for that period is done. Not because of willpower but because the money for other purposes is simply not in this account. A savings account, ideally at a separate institution to reduce the ease of transfer, holds money that is not available for spending. Its purpose is accumulation, not access. This structural partitioning does something profound. It removes the single pool illusion. Money for bills cannot accidentally become money for restaurants because it is physically in a different place. The discretionary pool has a visible limit. When it runs low, the signal is clear without any calculation required. They automate progress before spending begins. The foundational financial habit of people who build savings consistently is the automation of transfers before discretionary spending becomes possible. On the day income arrives, a predetermined amount transfers automatically to savings and investment accounts. This transfer happens before any discretionary spending, before any decision making, before the money is ever experienced as available for consumption. This is the pay yourself first principle in its operational form. And its power is not philosophical. It is mechanical. Money that has already moved to savings before you see it does not feel like money you are choosing not to spend. It feels like money that was never available for spending. The psychological experience is completely different. When saving requires a conscious decision to transfer money at the end of the month, competing with the accumulated spending impulses of that month, with a depleted willpower reservoir, with whatever emotional state the day has produced, saving loses most of the time. When saving happens automatically at the beginning of the month, before any of those competing forces are active, saving wins every time. Not through discipline, through design. They evaluate cost per use, not cost per purchase. A subtler but important habit of financially thoughtful people is the practice of evaluating purchases not by their upfront cost but by their cost per actual use. A $30 item used once costs $30 per use. A $120 item used 60 times costs $2 per use. This reframe produces counterintuitive but financially sound purchasing behavior. It discourages cheap, low-quality items that will be used rarely and replaced frequently. It encourages investment in quality items that will be used heavily and last for years. More importantly, it forces a pre-purchase honest evaluation of actual intended use, which is one of the most effective brakes on impulse purchasing available. When you ask yourself how many times you will realistically use this before buying, a significant proportion of purchases reveal themselves as poor value. Not because they are expensive but because you will not actually use them enough to justify the cost at any price. They create intentional friction. While the commercial environment removes friction from spending, financially prepared people deliberately add it back. They do not save payment details on retail sites. They do not keep shopping apps on their phones. They maintain waiting periods for non-essential purchases. They unsubscribe from promotional emails. Each of these behaviors adds back a moment of deliberation that the commercial environment removed. Each friction point is an opportunity for the rational, goal-oriented mind to evaluate whether the purchase serves its stated intentions. The goal is not to make purchasing miserable. It is to make it intentional. Intentional purchases are aligned with values and goals. Unintentional purchases are the invisible drain. The difference between them is the presence or absence of a moment of deliberation. And friction is what creates that moment. Now, let's talk about the emotional architecture of overspending. No discussion of habitual overspending is complete without an honest examination of its emotional dimensions. Because for many people, the spending that drains their accounts most consistently is not random. It is patterned, and the pattern maps almost exactly onto their emotional life. Spending as emotional management. Research in consumer psychology has consistently documented what practitioners in the field call retail therapy. The use of purchasing behavior as a mechanism for regulating emotional states. When people are stressed, bored, sad, lonely, anxious, or even excited, they spend. Not because they have evaluated their needs and determined that a purchase is necessary, but because the act of purchasing provides a reliable and immediate emotional reward. The dopamine response to anticipating and completing a purchase is well documented. It is similar in mechanism, if not in magnitude, to other reward-seeking behaviors. The positive emotional state produced by a purchase is real. It is immediate, and it provides genuine temporary relief from whatever emotional discomfort preceded it. This is what makes spending as emotional management so difficult to address through rational financial advice alone. The spending is solving a real problem. It is providing real relief. The financial cost is delayed, invisible, and spread across dozens of small transactions. The emotional benefit is immediate, visible, and felt as a genuine improvement in well-being. The brain makes this trade readily and repeatedly. The asymmetry of reward. There is a specific asymmetry at the heart of why saving is psychologically difficult that deserves direct examination. Spending produces immediate, visible gratification. You buy something. The thing exists. You have it. The reward is present and tangible. Saving produces delayed, invisible gratification. You do not buy something. Nothing new exists. You have slightly more money in an account you are not looking at. The reward is future, abstract, and entirely removed from the sensory experience of the present moment. From the perspective of the brain's reward system, which evolved to prioritize immediate and concrete rewards over delayed and abstract ones, spending and saving are not remotely equivalent alternatives. Spending is rewarded. Saving is not. At least not in any way the immediate reward system can register. This asymmetry is not a character defect. It is a predictable output of how human motivation works. And understanding it reframes the challenge of saving from a moral question, why am I not more disciplined, to a design question, how do I make the reward of saving more immediate and visible? Visual progress trackers, savings milestones with small associated rewards, the concrete naming of savings goals. All of these are attempts to make the invisible reward of saving slightly more visible and immediate. They work not because they change the math but because they make the psychological experience of saving more similar to the psychological experience of spending. The social spending dimension. A final psychological dimension worth naming is the social function of spending. In most cultures, spending is a social behavior as much as an economic one. Sharing a meal, buying gifts, contributing to shared experiences, maintaining the visible markers of social status. These are the spending behaviors most deeply embedded in social connection and identity. Reducing spending in these categories can feel, and sometimes genuinely is, a social cost. The person who stops joining colleagues for lunch to save money may pay a real social price. The person who stops buying birthday gifts of a certain caliber may experience genuine relationship costs. Acknowledging this dimension is important because overspending advice that ignores the social function of money is advice that will be resisted and abandoned when it conflicts with real social needs. The goal is not to eliminate spending. It is to make spending intentional. To distinguish between the spending that serves genuine social needs and the spending that is habitual, automatic, and invisible. To retain the first deliberately and reduce the second systematically. That distinction is where the 15 habits live. Now, let's dive into the 15 small habits that close the drain. Everything discussed so far is context. Necessary context. But context does not change. These 15 habits are the practical expression of everything this documentary has covered. They are not motivational slogans. They are specific, behavioral, environmental interventions, each one targeting a specific mechanism of the invisible drain. They are organized into 4 categories: habits of friction, habits of awareness, habits of evaluation, and habits of structure. The habits of friction, adding deliberation back into spending. Habit 1. The waiting period. Establish a mandatory gap between desire and purchase for all non-essential items. A useful framework is 24 hours for items under $50. 72 hours for items under $200. 1 full week for anything above $200. The science behind this is straightforward. The intensity of a purchasing impulse decays rapidly with time. Research shows that the desire to purchase a specific item, if not acted on immediately, diminishes significantly within 24 hours in the majority of cases. Items that survive the waiting period are considerably more likely to be genuine needs or values-aligned wants rather than impulse responses to commercial triggers. Habit 2. Unsubscribe from promotional communications. Spend 30 minutes removing yourself from every marketing email list in your inbox. Use an unsubscribe service or work through them manually. Every promotional email is a manufactured desire delivered directly to your attention. You did not have that desire before opening the email. The email created it. Removing the delivery mechanism removes the manufactured desire at its source. This is one of the highest leverage friction habits available because it prevents the desire from forming in the first place rather than requiring resistance after it has formed. Habit 3. Remove shopping apps from your phone. Delete retail apps and force yourself to use a browser for any online purchases. Apps are optimized specifically for frictionless impulse purchasing. They have notifications designed to pull you back. They have saved payment methods that eliminate deliberation time. They have personalized product feeds designed to generate desire. Removing them and replacing them with the relative friction of a browser purchase adds back several critical seconds of deliberation to every transaction. Habit 4. Remove saved payment methods. Delete stored credit card information from retail sites so that every purchase requires manually entering card details. The 20 to 30 seconds required to retrieve and enter payment information is not an inconvenience. It is a deliberation window. It is the gap in which a small but significant percentage of impulse purchases are abandoned. Do not close this window for yourself. Habit 5. The overnight rule for large purchases. For any purchase over $100, commit to never buying on the same day the desire arises. Sleep on it. Brain chemistry during sleep alters the emotional intensity of daytime impulses. The item that felt essential at 8 in the evening will often feel merely optional the following morning. The habits of awareness, creating ambient financial consciousness. Habit 6. The daily balance check. Spend 30 seconds every morning looking at your account balance before doing anything else with your phone. This single habit, practiced consistently, rebuilds ambient financial awareness. It means that every spending decision made throughout the day is made with a background awareness of current financial position rather than in an information vacuum. The check does not need to be an analysis. It only needs to happen. The number seen in the morning informs the day's spending at a subconscious level even when it is not consciously referred to. Habit 7. Use physical cash for discretionary categories. For categories like dining out, entertainment, and personal spending, withdraw cash at the beginning of the week and use only that cash. When the cash is gone, spending in that category is done for the week. No calculation required. The visual, physical reality of the remaining cash provides continuous ambient spending awareness that digital accounts never can. And the neurological pain of physical cash leaving your hand provides a genuine break on frivolous spending. Habit 8. Track every penny for 1 month. For a single month, write down every transaction at the moment it occurs. Every coffee, every parking fee, every impulse purchase, everything. This habit does not need to be permanent. 1 month is sufficient. The purpose is to make visible the invisible patterns of spending that ambient tracking misses. Most people who do this exercise describe it as genuinely shocking. Not because any individual transaction is revelatory but because the aggregate pattern becomes impossible to ignore. Once you have seen the pattern, you cannot unsee it. And you will make different decisions as a result. Habit 9. The monthly subscription audit. Once a month, review every recurring charge. For each one, ask a single question. If this subscription did not exist and I encountered it today at the current price, would I sign up for it? If the honest answer is no, cancel it immediately. Not after the current billing period. Immediately. The subscription audit typically reveals spending that has continued for months or years beyond any point of genuine value. Canceling these charges does not produce a sense of deprivation. It produces a sense of relief. The money was not providing value. Stopping its loss is purely beneficial. The habits of evaluation, changing how purchases are assessed. Habit 10. Calculate cost per use before major purchases. Before any purchase over $50, estimate honestly how many times you will use this item in the next 12 months. Divide the price by that number. If a $40 item will be used twice, its cost per use is $20. If a $160 item will be used 80 times, its cost per use is $2. The second item is the better financial decision despite being 4 times the upfront cost. This evaluation reframes cheapness as a virtue and often reveals it to be the opposite. Habit 11. 1 in, 1 out. For every new physical item brought into your home, 1 item of a similar type must leave before or immediately after. This habit forces a genuine evaluation of whether the new item represents an improvement over what it replaces. It reduces accumulation. It reduces the pleasure of acquisition as a standalone reward. And it gently but consistently surfaces the question, do I actually need this, or do I just want the feeling of acquiring it? Habit 12. The specific list commitment. Never enter a shop or open a retail website without a specific, written list. Commit in advance that anything not on the list is a future purchase subject to the waiting period. Research on shopping with lists consistently shows dramatic reductions in unplanned purchases. The list functions as a pre-commitment device, a decision made in a rational, non-purchasing state that governs behavior in a purchasing environment where impulse is stronger. Habit 13. The emotional check-in. Before any non-essential purchase, pause for 10 seconds and honestly identify your emotional state. Are you stressed, bored, anxious, tired, or seeking reward? If you are in any heightened emotional state, defer the purchase. Come back when you are in a neutral state and see if the desire remains. This habit does not eliminate emotional spending, but it creates a moment of metacognitive awareness, a brief recognition that this desire may have an emotional rather than practical origin, that allows the deliberative mind to engage before the purchase completes. The habits of structure, building permanent financial architecture. Habit 14. Separate accounts for separate purposes. Create dedicated accounts for bills, discretionary spending, and savings. Fund each account at the beginning of each month with its predetermined allocation. Do not transfer between them. This is the structural partitioning discussed earlier in this documentary. Its power is environmental rather than psychological. The money for bills cannot be spent on dining out because it is not in the dining account. The spending account has a visible, physical limit. When it empties, the spending is done. No willpower required. No calculation required. The structure does the work. Habit 15. Create visible progress for savings goals. Give each savings goal a name, a number, and a visual representation, a chart, a thermometer graphic, a jar filling up on your phone's home screen. The psychological asymmetry between spending and saving is partially addressable by making saving visible. When you can see progress, when saving feels like adding something rather than losing something, the reward system begins to engage with the process. Name the goal, track the progress, make the invisible visible. This single habit, combined with automated transfers, converts saving from an act of deprivation into something that feels, incrementally, like what it actually is: building something. Now, the truth about where the money goes. The money that vanishes from your account is not leaving through one bad decision. It is leaving through dozens of small, frictionless, habitual transactions that individually feel harmless and collectively drain everything you intended to save. And the reason most people cannot stop this pattern by trying harder is that trying harder is the wrong response to a structural problem. The invisible drain is not a failure of character. It is a failure of design. And the solution is redesign, not self-recrimination. The 15 habits in this documentary are not restrictions. They are not punishments. They are architectural changes to your financial environment that redirect the natural flow of your behavior toward outcomes you have already said you want. You do not need to want to save money more. You already want that. You need a system in which saving happens before the wanting to spend begins. In which the friction is on the right side of the transaction. In which your financial position is visible enough to inform your decisions rather than invisible enough to be ignored. Financial literacy is not primarily about knowing investment strategies or understanding compound interest. It begins here, in the daily architecture of how money moves through a life. Fix the architecture. The money stops disappearing. And then, for the first time, you have something to build with. If these 15 habits have changed the way you think about where your money goes, you have already done something most people never do. You have looked at the system instead of blaming yourself. But here is what comes next. Stopping the drain is the first chapter of a financial life, not the whole story. Once the bleeding stops, once you actually have money accumulating at the end of each month, money that used to vanish before it could be put to work, the question immediately becomes, what do you do with it? Not in a general motivational sense. Specifically, in what sequence? In what vehicles? With what time horizons and what structural protections? Because money that stops being spent but is not deliberately directed somewhere will find a way to disappear again. Human nature ensures this. Lifestyle inflation fills the gap. New spending habits form around the newly available resources. In our next video, we are going to look at exactly what comes after the drain is closed. The specific, sequential financial moves that turn retained income into lasting financial progress. Not theory, not inspiration, a framework. The kind of framework that takes the money you just stopped losing and turns it into something that will still be working for you 20 years from now. If that is what you are building toward, do not miss it. Thank you for watching.